It is reported that 2 state banks will extend financial assistance of 13.5 billion rupees to bail out the cash-strapped SriLankan Airlines. According to the Daily Mirror, Public Enterprise Development Minister Lakshman Kiriyala had submitted the cabinet memorandum in this regard.
According to the newspaper, it is learnt that the 2 state banks will issue the letters of comfort in this regard soon. It goes on to note, however, Finance Minister Mangala Samaravira, in his observation on the cabinet paper, has stressed the need to restructure the national carrier or to find a new investor for the development of it. At present, SriLankan Airlines owes the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation over 13 billion rupees. At a meeting held recently, both sides had agreed the airline would pay a sum of 800 million rupees this week and the remainder will be paid off using a loan from a private bank.
खनिज तेल नीतिगत संस्थाවට යම්කිසි ණය මුදලක් ගෙවන්න එහෙම තියෙනවා ඒවා පියවීම සඳහා යම්කිසි ණය මුදලක් දෙන්න එහෙම තීරණයක්
නෑ There is nothing new to be done on that matter. Yesterday the Treasury Secretary said he would give assurance for all matters and the amount required by them would be released as a loan to make payments for the fuel.
මේවා තෙල් ආනයන කිරීම සඳහා ලබා දෙනවා.
අමතුම පෞද්ගලික බැංකුව යටතේද නැත්නම් රාජ්‍ය බැංකුව යටතේද
රාජ්‍ය බැංකුව යටතේ.
For 3 years this government had failed to introduce a successful business plan for the airline. There is no permanent CEO at the airline. The CEO has said he will step down and now he is like a normal employee. This institution cannot be operated like a retail store. If more loans are obtained under this present context, the situation will go from bad to worse.
This is an environment where the organization has been continuously making losses. So it requires some urgent actions. Fuel is the biggest cost in the airline. Second part is the aircraft lease cost. Third part is the labor. In an operating airline, these are called direct operating costs. They should recover their direct operating cost. Otherwise, you are losing your entirely. And where there are excess staff, we need to arrest that. Some bitter medicine need to be taken. So it's good to have 5,000 people working rather than all entire 7,000 people going home. So we have to make that sacrifices.
The price formula itself contains so many duplicated cost components. For example, now throughput charge, there are 3 or 4 throughput charges, and on top of that, CPC and CPST also charge separate profit margins. So with all these additions, I think the price of jet fuel is jacked up by additional 20%. So out of 20%, if one can save 5%, and with the 400 million liters of jet fuel consumption in SriLankan Airlines, easily if saving just one US cents per US gallon can save more than 600 million rupees per annum. I think probably we can save about 5 rupees.
The Rajapaksa relatives moved the airline to bankruptcy. The Ranil Wickremesinghes of the Government of Good Governance brought more debt to it. Now they are trying to get more loans from state banks. However, the government signed an agreement with the Asian Development Bank and it was noted these state banks do not have the capital and shares have to be sold. On one hand, they are trying to give loans and on the other hand, they are trying to secure a greater loan for the Central Expressway. Are they trying to politicize the 2 state banks and sell them off?
A very good evening. The point of discussion this evening is the white elephant in the country, SriLankan Airlines, the debt-ridden national airline. Now, discussions were underway regarding the 5 billion rupees sought by CPC over payments due for fuel. Now, the airline had agreed to pay 800 million rupees and the remainder as a loan from a private bank. Now, today it is reported that 2 state banks are going to come forward to bail out the national airline. Joining me this evening is Mr. Ashoka Das, a veteran journalist and who has vast experience in the field. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
So before we move on to the debt-ridden airline, let's talk about the state banks. If you could elaborate to us, what is the main function of state banks?
Now, there are 3 state banks, Bank of Ceylon, People's Bank and National Savings Bank. Now, these banks were started to encourage the saving habits of Sri Lankans and then support the entrepreneurship of Sri Lankans. I don't think anywhere in their objectives has the point that the state banks should lend money for other state-owned enterprises.
So from what you say, it appears that the state banks are basically established if a farmer wants to buy a hand tractor to give him a loan.
I mean, that is the way that we should move forward. If I want to raise a loan and if you want to raise a loan, say for an example a housing loan, then they will ask collaterals. they will ask, what is my business plan if I am to start a small SME? Are they checking the same way the objectives and the business plan of SriLankan Airlines before lending money to those SriLankan Airlines? I mean, all these banks are pushed to lend money to this SriLankan Airlines. Is it with other motives? Is it with the proper intentions? That is the thing that we have to identify and understand at this juncture.
Mr. Dias, how good will it be for the economy if the state banks are used for this?
Now, to me, if SriLankan Airlines has a business plan and then our own bank supporting SriLankan Airlines, well and good. But we all have discussed and we have understood enough that they don't have a business plan at the moment. CPC ultimately gave an ultimatum and said that if you don't provide us the money, if you don't return the money, they will stop supplying fuel to SriLankan Airlines. And now that debt is covered by state banks. Now this is a very dangerous situation.
Mr. Dias, on that same line of thought, now we have the Hambantota report which was given to the Chinese for 99 years. Now if SriLankan Airlines is bailed out by the two state banks, will it be considered as the two state banks are now owning the airline?
Yes, now technically speaking that is the way. But we all know that what happens with the money that state banks spend. Now state banks are used to spend for even road development. Now is it the way forward? Is it the correct decision? This is the function of the central bank to evaluate this. I mean, if the state banks has an issue, that will reflect very badly, very negatively on our national economy.
So when a state bank has an issue, they should run back to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the governing body of all the banks, the regulatory body of all the banks. So one would question, if these two state banks are to be used by the government to bail out a certain state-owned enterprise, a loss-making enterprise, isn't the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the regulatory authority of all banks and financial institutions in Sri Lanka, not doing their job properly here?
Now, central bank failing in their job is not a new thing. From 2015 we have seen this, and there is enough and more proof that central bank is not looking after even themselves.
So who is responsible for this, and what will happen to the national airline? In the days to come, we will see what will happen.